Everyone these days wants to be on a podcast, right? There's a win-win for everyone in terms of content exposure.
Well, this is outreach. They don't care too much about you. They care more so what they're going to get. I would liken your podcast outreach similar to a sale or a pitch. You're selling yourself. You are selling your podcast. You're selling.
Don't believe that because you might have less than 1,000 followers across all your platforms, you can't get a really big guest on your podcast.
Welcome, legends, to Podcast Marketing Secrets,
where we share all of the tactics and strategies from the #1 podcasting agency
on how to launch, grow, manage, and monetize a successful, high-converting podcast.
Let's take your business and content to the next level.
We've been in the podcasting game for over 8 years, and along the way, we've been able to get industry leaders, not only on our podcast, but on our clients' podcast. That's a part of our service and system as well, that we not only do for our clients and partners, but we also show and pass on to our podcast licensees on how to do. And today we want to give you some tips for you to be able to get high-profile guests on your podcast.
Yeah. One of the lesser known benefits of podcasting is actually the relationships that you can develop simply as a result of having a podcast. It's almost like it's this magical invitation that allows you to get some pretty incredible conversations with some higher level individuals that you might not have previously had access to. However, it's not a golden ticket in itself. You can't just be waving around here being like, hey, I've got a podcast, and that's enough to attract, your big dogs, your Alex Hermosi's, your Chris Willex's, okay? You gotta do a little bit of work here as well. However, I just wanted to highlight that it is one thing that we've been able to observe in the time that we've been doing this, which is that you can form some fantastic connections and relationships through your podcast. So when we're considering how you would outreach and approach some of these higher level individuals, I guess we might go firstly right back to identifying the types of individuals that you actually want to invite onto your podcast. Some people just get very excited by the idea of bringing someone onto the podcast, but they haven't considered whether that person's aligned with their strategy for the podcast in particular. So that's the first step, is when you're actually looking to develop your outreach list for your podcast, you have to consider, are these people in my industry? Are they going to be able to speak into the types of topics that we've already established are the things that my listener base want to actually hear about and consume? So I would say that's actually the first step in this journey, is properly curating your list. Now, on your list, you don't just want to have your heavy hitters, okay? We definitely want to have the dream people that we want to reach out to. However, building the credibility of your podcast, especially if yours is not too old and you're relatively new to the space, is what's going to be important. And so you want to not only highlight those big hitters, but maybe some more mid-level people that you might want to invite on, and even maybe some beginner level people, depending on where you're at in your podcasting journey.
Ultimately, anyone you bring on your podcast has to be in full relation with the mission and goals that you have for your content and marketing strategy. There has to be intention behind it. It's one of the biggest mistakes that we see time and time again some podcasts make, that is that they're just having guests for the sake of having guests without properly assessing how is this helping the overarching strategy that we have. It has 100,000 followers, therefore I should have it on my podcast. No. If that person has nothing to do with your market, dream customer, and what you're trying to achieve, and it's not going to help with generate sales in the back end for your business, there's absolutely no reason to have that person on. They can go on to another podcast that is in relation with their particular industry. So don't just assess the potential for someone to be a guest on your podcast based on follower count.
Yeah, and the other really important aspect of that is that often people are... The other important aspect when it comes to follower count on your social is that often people will have one or two main platforms. So for instance, they might be quite popular on Instagram or quite popular on Facebook. So when you are considering as well who you're going to be inviting onto your podcast, consider, will your content that you're creating out of the podcast actually reach their audience? Because if that's the intention, you have to think about the end result. If we're considering some platforms that don't yet have a collaborator feature on them for you to be able to share that content with the guest and for them to naturally then share it to their audience, but that platform in particular is where they have their biggest follower base, is it still worth it for you to have that conversation with them if the main goal of you bringing them on was to target their audience? It's something to consider. The alternate of that could be, okay, they might have a follower base on a platform where we might not have that collaborator content available to us. There are other ways that you could look at to get that content to them, or you might just simply be going after it for the relationship purpose as well. So very important to know that some potential influencers or people of a high level that you want to invite onto the podcast might just have follower bases on different platforms too.
And this comes back to something that we speak on time and time again, that it is a big motivation for you to want to have omnipresence, meaning repurposing the content that you make on your long form podcast episodes to be able to get you across all major platforms. Because ultimately, as Kyle said, a lot of these potential guests that you might want to have might just be on one or two specific platforms, and they might see no big incentive for them to come on your podcast if it's on a platform that has nothing to do with them. To give you an example for that, on my own podcast, I brought a LinkedIn expert, which I knew was the perfect collaboration with my specific target market as well as their dream customer. And ultimately, he cares more about LinkedIn, right? So if I'm not making content that is going to be distributed on that platform, he might not have the same motivation or incentive to come in. So remember, having omnipresence and maximizing the repurposing will allow you to have a big motivation for anyone to want to come on the platform. And this is a little trick in there for you to be able to get those high profile guests, which ultimately is what we're trying to help you here. And is that if you look at a high profile a specific personal brand or authority, you might see that they have a big following in one or two major platforms, but they might have a smaller following in some of the other platforms. You don't want to reach through the main one because that's where everyone is doing it, right? Everyone might be in the Instagram DMs. That might be their main platform. So it will be difficult to get through. So it will be easier if you can find them on LinkedIn or X, where their following might not be as big. So it's harder to get ignored, especially if you have the right message when reaching out.
Yeah, and I guess that leads us to then the outreach aspect of getting some of these guests. What does outreach actually look like when you're wanting to approach? Now, I would liken your podcast outreach similar to a sale in a way, or a pitch. You're selling yourself. You are selling your podcast. You're selling the benefit that they get from being on your podcast, okay? And depending on the level of the people that you're approaching, I mean, personally, here at Vibez, we like to sell the same pretty much to everybody because you always want to be putting your best foot forward. However, for some of the players that might have a bit more influence or status, they might not necessarily see the reason for them to give up their time in order to come on your podcast. If purely say they were basing it off of just follow count, they might say, well, I've got 100,000 followers. You've only got 20,000 followers. What benefit do I get as a result of being on your podcast? So it's 100% a sell for these people to also give up their time. So in your outreach, there's a few core things that you should include in order to really try to appeal to these people. So the first thing that you want to include in your outreach is your stats. These are the things that showcase the work that you've been putting into the podcast. So that not only includes your follower base, your views. So let's break down now what outreach might look like for some. So let's break down now what outreach should look like. What would be the first thing that we'd be looking to include on outreach if we were say, well, it applies across email and also DMs.
Yeah, absolutely. And first thing is you need to define, as I was explaining before, which is going to be the channel, if not multiple channels. This is it. You don't want to just die on one try because they might not pay attention on X, they might ignore your Instagram DM, but they might respond through email. So you want to find absolutely where can you reach them and craft the same message across the different platforms. You might change it lightly depending on exactly where you're doing it for the purposes of them opening. But let's assume email because that's going to be actually the most secure way of getting most high level people because they will either have their own email that they're handling because chances are they will be the ones reading the message or they will have some type of executive assistant or VA that is overlooking all those emails. So first thing is you want to have a strong one-liner that is gonna get their attention. It's similar to a YouTube title and thumbnail. Your email subject line needs to be compelling, needs to be attention getter, and needs to stand out on that full inbox that they will probably have. So make sure that in 60 characters, by the way, that is the length that will show on an iPhone screen, you are prompting them to know exactly what this is for and giving them enough incentive to want to open everything else. And also make sure you use your pre-header as well. That will just help you as well give a little bit more context to the subject line for them to get a little bit more intrigue. Think of those emotions like curiosity or even excitement. Some people might get excited to be invited for a particular podcast because everyone these days wants to be on a podcast, right? There's a win-win for everyone in terms of content exposure, sharing of audiences, network, and relationship building. So everyone wants to be on a podcast. They just want to make sure that it's not a waste of their time and that expectations and the benefits are aligned for everyone.
Yeah. And so once you've got them to open the email based on your subject line and your preview text as well, then what you want to do is give a brief, quick statement about you, about the podcast, who you are, right? Just give them a little bit of context on you. Do not make this lengthy because ultimately, as well, this is outreach. They don't care too much about you. They care more so what they're going to get, okay? So we want to skip ahead to that part, but you still do need to provide some context so they can determine, oh, okay, yes, this is something that I should continue looking into, continue reading.
Important too, don't make it all about you. Make sure to include some type of compliment so that they know that you have also done your research because high-level entrepreneurs and personal brands respect someone that comes already knowing about them, not just coming across a random generic type of email that is just gonna plainly be ignored.
Yeah, so usually after that first description of the podcast, you'll then jump into a custom compliment for them, something that indicates that you follow them, that you've seen their content, you know what they're about, and you know what makes them different. Do not, for the love of God, make that compliment generic, make it custom, really convey that you know them and you get them. And this conversation is going to be super valuable because they might not even get questions that they're regularly asked because you know them at their core. So after you've done both of those things, you've laid the groundwork for your podcast, you've highlighted or given them a little bit of a compliment about them, you then want to go into what magic you can make together.
Here's where you want to pitch why this collaboration is the perfect fit.
So after you've done those first two parts, the next aspect is you want to pitch. You want to pitch why this collaboration is going to be beneficial. Now, there's a few things that you can draw on in terms of inclusions in this sense. It could be, depending on your follower base, it could be the followers that you have, your audience, getting them exposure to that. It could purely be just in the content in itself. Are you willing to collaborate with them on content? Does it mean for them that they don't have to create content for a few days this month because they can actually just leverage yours? What are some other things?
After you complete that pitch of why this makes total sense for both of you to get together and produce a podcast episode and create content essentially for both of your audiences, you want to outline additional benefits that they get by coming on the podcast. And a low-hanging fruit in here that I don't see enough podcasts use is outlining the entire deliverables that you will have as a part of the content creation process, which again comes back to that repurposing of the content in itself, because someone might be more inclined to jump on a podcast if they know that they will get not only a long form episode that is also going to have all their links to their platforms, to whatever they want to promote, including websites, maybe lead magnets, whatever this strategy they're following to grow themselves, as well as being, of course, on the audio platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but also knowing that there will be viral short form pieces of content to be created that will be posted across all the major platforms, including LinkedIn, Shorts, Instagram, Facebook, X. So this is a big selling point, and make sure as well that you outline that you will invite them as collaborators in the platforms that allow this type of feature like Instagram, so that they can see more of the value that they will get by simply showing up. And guess what? Everyone is looking to get more short form pieces of content. You can never have enough viral short form content. So big selling point in there to include how many exactly you're planning to create, whether it's 3, 5, 10, obviously the more the better, just because it is as well a volume game that everyone is trying to play.
The other thing that we do that's unique in podcast outreach is actually highlight the suggested episode that we want to create with that person. I've seen other podcast guest outreach speaking into highlighting the topics that their particular highlighting the topics that the individuals they're pitching can speak into. However, something that we like to do is suggest the exact title for the episode that they can create together. You're planting the seed for what that final output or deliverable could be. So that is also something that's quite unique that will really get their attention. So not only are you highlighting earlier that you know them through that custom compliment, you're reinforcing that later by suggesting to them what that thing could be that you're going to be speaking into.
And lastly, you want to start as well setting the ground rules for what that collaboration looks like. If it's a remote interview, explain that would be remotely using either Riverside or whichever other platform you're intending to use for your content purposes. And if it's in person, outline exactly where is the location of their studio that you're thinking, or if you're even willing to go to them. This is something extremely important as well to consider. Depending on who you're trying to get on your podcast, if it's a really big personality or individual online, you might have to go to them if your podcast still doesn't have as much leverage or commands as much authority. So be prepared that if you do get an opportunity with a big player, that you might have to go to them, and you need to be okay with that. Do not close the door just because they said, hey, dude, I can't go to you, but you can come to my office or fly to me or meet me here. Do everything in your power to not miss on the opportunity, because ultimately they have the leverage. They are the big personality, okay? Until your podcast becomes almost like an industry standard for your market that everyone wants to come to you. That it means that you will have more leverage then for people to want to come to. If you do interviews in person, which for a lot of our clients we do, and for ourselves we do as well. But again, this will work remotely too.
Cool. So now say that you are unable to contact your guest via email. You couldn't find it. It's not listed anywhere in their socials. You've really tried. The next best option is to send a DM. And as Nelson was highlighting earlier, you need to probably do that across a couple platforms. If they are particularly popular on one platform, I would still recommend reaching out on there, only because we've come across instances where we've reached out to somebody on a platform that they really don't use, like minimal presence, and they've responded back to us saying, hey, can you actually message me on my very popular platform, because that's where I like to communicate, which is fine. But it actually lends to your point that we got in touch with them through that lesser known platform as well. But very important distinction to highlight when you're doing your podcast guest outreach is that your DMs need to be very different from your emails. The structure needs to be the same, however, much more reduced. Just apply logic, I guess, in this sense, when you're doing your outreach, and custom that message in accordance with etiquette on the platform and what people would usually expect to receive in terms of message length.
Absolutely. And by the way, even though we were a little bit lengthier on the explanation of each individual segment, because it is crucial that you understand why that's a structure that works. So don't go and try to reinvent the wheel. We're telling you, this works. We have gotten incredibly massive personalities for some of our clients and ourselves using this exact structure. So don't question it, just do it. But at the same time, just think that these people don't have too much time. So keep it short, keep it simple. Don't overextend yourself. No one wants to read an email that is gonna take them more than 2 minutes. So keep it straight to the point, outline things, make it easy to read. This is another thing as well that I've seen people messed up with outreach, is they make a massive paragraph that is too difficult to read. And as soon as you see it, you're like, oh, this is too much. This seems like a scam. I'm completely overlooking this. So make it easier for them to want to come on your podcast. Think of that. Remove all the friction. Put all the outline, deliverables, benefits that they get, and a brief explanation of why that collaboration makes absolute sense and is a win-win for everyone. Some closing thoughts. Don't believe that because you might have less than 1,000 followers across all your platforms, you can't get a really big guest on your podcast. We have done this that many times that we know that as long as you follow this structure and you do a good pitch of why this collaboration is an absolute win for them and you will be able to land them. And lastly, do not give up. Just because someone didn't respond at the right time or because they say no right now, that doesn't mean that they will not come as a guest in the future. We have had people that said, hey, right now is not the right time. And we reached back to them months later, and then everything made total sense and we made it happen. Sometimes the reality is that you might be still too new. You might still be the new podcast in the block. So you still need to have some track record. That's why we don't put a big focus on that. If you're just getting started, we want to first build at least a minimum level of credibility so that it's easier basically to get those type of guests if that fits your strategy. But just remember, you can get industry leaders and high profile guests on your podcast regardless of the size. Although it gets easier to get this kind of people the more you grow, that doesn't mean that you can't get them at a lower level.
That brings us to a close. Everybody, I hope you gained some valuable tips on how you can approach your podcast guest outreach. As usual, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us on Podcast Marketing Secrets. If you found value in this episode, the best way you can support us in continuing to deliver this content to you is by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Now, if you're keen to connect with us, we are at Vibez Creative on all your other social media platforms. Please Send us your questions, engage with us, let us know what you want to hear about next on the podcast, and we'll be sure to create content around that.
And if you're interested in partnering with us for the highest level of support for you to be able to launch, grow, manage, and monetize a successful podcast for your business or your personal brand, we offer different levels of support, starting from our services, one-on-one coaching, as well as our completely done-for-you system. So if you're interested in finding out more, book a call with our team down in the description below.